There's a single line of dialogue that turned a completely absurd idea into one of the most re-watchable adventure films of the 2000s. The moment Nicolas Cage's character announces his plan to steal the Declaration of Independence, something clicks for audiences everywhere. It shouldn't work. It sounds ridiculous on paper. Yet somehow, National Treasure became the kind of film families return to again and again, and 2 decades later, people are still talking about it. The reason it holds up so well has everything to do with what was happening behind the camera, and most of it has never been fully appreciated by the people sitting in those theater seats. Start with what looks like the most authentic part of the entire film. Every single frame shot inside the National Archives rotunda was completely fabricated. The production team constructed the entire space from scratch on a soundstage, matching the real building's dimensions, lighting, and materials with obsessive precision. Filming anywhere near the actual Declaration of Independence was never going to happen. Preservation rules and security protocols made close-up camera work around the genuine artifact impossible. But that restriction accidentally made the film better. The replica rotunda gave filmmakers total creative control. Camera angles that would be physically impossible in the real building became routine on set. Reflections that would have plagued real location shooting were engineered out of existence. Audiences walked out of theaters genuinely believing the cast had been granted extraordinary access to one of America's most guarded documents. They hadn't. They had watched an obsessively crafted illusion, and it fooled everyone. The heist itself almost didn't survive contact with reality. Earlier versions of the break-in sequence were designed before the world changed, and once writers reconsidered the script through the lens of post-September 11 security awareness, the original plan felt embarrassingly naive. Audiences now understood what real institutional security looked like, and a plan that ignored that understanding would have been laughed out of the theater. Writers went back to the beginning, restructuring the entire theft sequence to feel methodical and grounded while still delivering the excitement the story demanded. That decision reshaped the film's entire opening act. Characters were reintroduced differently, pacing shifted considerably, and the tone became more deliberate. What might have felt dated instead became one of the film's most satisfying stretches precisely because the writers treated reality as a creative tool rather than an inconvenience. The character audiences remember most warmly almost had nothing to do with any of that. Riley Poole was originally written as a minor supporting figure, a tech-savvy sidekick with a handful of lines and no real personality beyond his utility to the plot. Early drafts gave him barely enough screen time to register. Everything changed during casting, when the creative team recognized that the right performer could transform this throwaway role into something genuinely essential. His humor became the film's pressure valve, giving audiences breathing room between dense historical exposition and rapid puzzle solving. More importantly, Riley became the audience's surrogate, the one asking the obvious questions out loud and reacting the way any reasonable person actually would. Without him, the film risked losing casual viewers entirely in layers of historical detail. What started as a footnote became one of the adventure's most irreplaceable ingredients. The Declaration of Independence replica that appeared on screen required an almost unreasonable level of dedication from the prop department. Multiple versions were constructed for different filming purposes. Stunt copies were built to survive action sequences, while the hero props were engineered to withstand extreme close-ups without revealing a single flaw under high-definition scrutiny. Period-accurate stains, natural fold lines, and subtle aging marks were all carefully replicated based on extensive reference photography of the real document. Even the texture of the parchment was matched so that actors could handle it physically without the sensation breaking the illusion. If even one version had looked slightly fake during a critical moment, the entire premise would have collapsed. That level of invisible craftsmanship is exactly what the film needed, and the prop team delivered it completely. Washington, D.C. provided its iconic landmarks freely, but not always in the way audiences assumed. The reflecting pool at the Lincoln Memorial, one of the most recognizable stretches of water in the entire country, was completely drained during production. Digital artists restored its appearance entirely in post-production, and the visual effects work was so seamless that virtually no one has ever questioned the shot. This detail reveals something important about how modern filmmaking actually operates. The most effective visual effects are never the spectacular explosions or impossible creatures. They are the corrections nobody notices, the drained pools filled with digital water, the skylines quietly adjusted, the impossible made invisible. The best work in visual effects is the work audiences were never supposed to find. The central concept behind the entire film predates all of it by years. The idea of a hidden treasure map on the back of the Declaration of Independence originated inside Disney's development offices long before a cast was assembled or a single frame was shot. Multiple screenwriters cycled through the project over an extended development period, each attempting to solve the same fundamental challenge. How do you make an outlandish premise feel plausible enough that audiences accept it? The historical grounding had to be credible, the lead character had to be compelling, and the chain of clues had to feel logical rather than arbitrary. That balance took years and numerous abandoned drafts to achieve. What makes the origin story remarkable is how little the core concept changed throughout the entire process. The treasure map on the Declaration survived every creative overhaul and every change in studio leadership. The final film rests on exactly the same foundation that was pitched years before production began. The historical accuracy woven through the puzzle elements went further than most viewers ever realized. Benjamin Franklin genuinely did write under the pen name Silence Dogood, submitting anonymous letters to his brother's newspaper as a teenager that became surprisingly popular with readers of the time. The movie took that authentic biographical detail and repurposed it as a clue mechanism. The way it functions on screen is entirely fictional, but its roots are completely real. This approach defined one of the film's most effective techniques throughout its entire runtime. By anchoring invented clues to verifiable historical facts, every puzzle felt more credible than pure fiction would allow. Audiences who researched Silence Dogood after watching the film discovered that the movie hadn't fabricated the reference at all. That discovery deepened trust in the story and made even its wildest logical leaps feel grounded in something genuine. The dollar bill sequence played the same game with different stakes. Every symbol shown on screen during that sequence is genuinely present on real currency. The unfinished pyramid, the eye above it, all of it is actually there. But the meanings the film assigns to those symbols have no connection to their documented historical purpose. Their real significance relates to national ideals involving strength, vigilance, and the country's ongoing development, not hidden treasure maps or buried fortunes. The film deliberately reinterpreted authentic imagery through a fictional lens, and the consequences extended well beyond the theater. That sequence alone fueled years of conspiracy discussions about hidden messages in American currency, conversations that had existed in fringe spaces before but suddenly found a mainstream audience. The film didn't create those theories, but it gave them a spotlight they had never previously enjoyed. Geography received considerably less respect than history did. Anyone who maps the journey taken across the film will notice almost immediately that the distances covered simply do not add up. Characters travel between major American cities at speeds that would require something closer to teleportation than any realistic form of transportation. Filmmakers made this choice consciously, understanding that showing realistic travel times would drain the adventure of the urgency it needed to function. The treasure hunt had to feel like a race, and pausing to account for logical geography would have shattered that rhythm completely. It is one of those filmmaking shortcuts that only becomes visible when someone deliberately looks for it, because the pacing does its job effectively enough that there is never time to calculate distances before the next clue demands full attention. The film's commercial performance told a story that opening weekend numbers alone couldn't capture. While the debut was respectable, the weeks that followed defined what the film actually was. Families returned multiple times. Word of mouth drove a steady stream of new viewers throughout the holiday season. The box office curve refused to drop the way most blockbusters do after their initial weekend. By the end of its theatrical run, the adventure had earned over $300 million worldwide, well beyond initial projections, and the sustained performance revealed something studios pay close attention to. A film that audiences voluntarily revisit carries a different kind of value than one that front-loads its entire audience into opening weekend. That loyalty built the confidence necessary to greenlight a sequel. Perhaps the most enduring legacy of the film involves something no studio can engineer through marketing. The writing on the back of the Declaration of Independence actually exists. The real document genuinely has text on its reverse side, not a treasure map or a coded message, but a simple identification label reading Original Declaration of Independence dated July 4, 1776, added during a period when the document was frequently rolled up and transported. Writers took that mundane preservation detail and transformed it into the foundation of an entire adventure. That single creative leap became the engine driving the whole plot, and it worked because a genuinely real detail provided its foundation. Audiences walked out of theaters believing the back of the Declaration held real secrets, and many went looking for the truth afterward. What they found was far less dramatic than the film suggested, but the fact that real writing actually exists gave the fiction just enough credibility to keep the legend alive.